Okay, how do you incorporate quotes? Let's have a look here. After some up and down bouncing. All right, you are required, of course, to consult the previous material from this Prezi, but I'm going to jump right into the how part because this is the most relevant to building an effective essay. So how do you incorporate outside quoted material into your essay? Okay, so some things are important and need to be said out loud. Things like make sure you are typing your quotes correctly, word for word. If you have errors within quotation marks, you are being careless, you're being sloppy, and you don't want to be careless or sloppy with your ideas because if you don't care about your ideas, why would I? Okay, so type correctly. My strong suggestion is to never copy and paste quotes. It creates formatting nightmares. And you know, there could be font issues and just things that are generally distracting to readers. You don't want to have distracted readers. So please make sure you type them carefully. Hey, there's an exclamation point. You know I'm serious. All right. Okay. You want to make sure, I choose this word massage here very purposefully because you want your quotes to be smoothly integrated. You think about if you ever got a massage, your muscles are, there's better blood flow. Everything, you know, is running more smoothly when you get a good massage. And so you kind of want that to be the case with your quotes as well, because you are incorporating outside voices into a piece of writing that is ultimately, you know, the majority of it, the large majority of it is your voice. So you want to have that process be, it's never going to be completely seamless, but you want to aspire to seamlessness, smoothness. All right. So when you just plop a quote, freestanding quotations, they're distracting, and you know it's up to you to make them make sense to me. If you just drop a quote into a paragraph and be like, you know, kablamo, maybe I don't share your kablamo. You know what I mean? You have to explain its relevance for your argument. So never just plop quotes into your essay. I'm yelling at you with all caps because I am serious. All right, so you need helpful information before, during, and after every quote that you utilize. And I want to walk you through all three of those phases, before being the first one, of course. Okay, before you open your quote, you want to have an introductory phrase. Sometimes it's called a signal phrase, but you want to introduce your sources to your reader, much like if, you know, instead of a reader and a writer, you were a speaker and a listener, or two people having a conversation. And if you were to bring in a third person into that conversation, you would want to say, okay, wait, before I bring this person in, here's who they are. Here's why you should care about what they have to say. Okay, and that's what signal phrases do. So who is your author? Okay, and APA, just for, you know, just for the cheap seats here, last names only. And then their credentials. All right, why they make for a worthwhile source. Now, expertise can be defined in a number of different ways, but usually it's what the person does for a living or where they work. And sometimes those things can overlap, of course. Okay, so if you have a New York Times article in your essay, you want to be very proud of the fact that someone is in your essay who works for the New York Times. You don't just get to saunter into New York Times and say, oh, I'd like one of your reporter jobs, please. Okay, so according to New York Times reporter Winters, quote, a good teacher can mean, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so you can see the year there in parentheses after the last name, but up before it here is New York Times reporter. So you want to be very proud of your sources, because otherwise, if you're not doing that, you are opening yourself up to accusations of, well, is this person trying to be ashamed of who their source is? You don't want to do that. Okay, so pivot here now to verbs of attribution. Those are verbs that are descriptive and appropriate rather to your quote's purpose. That's a mouthful. Okay, so if you have if you're reporting on the results of a study that a group did, or you know, maybe a research team did, well, then reports is a good verb for you. Okay, argues if you're doing more like an opinion piece, or if someone's writing you know, like a column in a newspaper or something like that. So you think about the differences between argues and reports. A report is kind of straightforward, objective information. Argues is a bit more opinionated, right? A little more subjective. So you think about the differences in those two verbs, and that hopefully that you get the point that I'm driving at here, which is that the verbs you choose can help sort of prepare your reader for what each quote is going to contribute to your argument. Okay, another example would be like questions. You know, the author of No Doy asks a question, and of course, lots more. Now, in my classroom, I make students write down 3 off the top of your head. They're very easily Googleable. Oh, there's your word of the day. And there's plenty of ways to find verbs of attribution out there. Okay, present tense, that almost always means they end in S. because you want to see your essay as a living thing. I really like this idea. When you use present tense verbs of attribution, you're really treating your essay as sort of alive and in the moment, as you're like capturing your reader's imagination and hopefully, persuading them to see the world the way you do, at least through the very narrow lens of your subject matter. So as that is a sort of an active, in the moment sort of process, I think present tense verbs kind of captures that in a nice way. Okay, stay away from says, stay away from talks. Now, if you're using like a YouTube video of someone actually saying something, that's okay. But most of the time, my students tend to work with printed materials, or at least materials that originate in print or are read in nature. So you don't hear an article talk unless you are using that cool feature in EBSCOhost. So stay away from those verbs. All right, so punctuation after your quote. A comma is great. I'm sorry, before the quote. A comma is the most common punctuation, but colons are effective. Mix it up. All right, vary it, V-A-R-Y. Make it various in nature. So before the quote, spend some time introducing your source. During the quote, just to be clear, type it correctly. All right, use a closed quote when your quote ends. I strongly prefer direct quotes than paraphrases. You notice I'm not even really teaching you about paraphrases, despite what your textbook has to say about them. So just bear with me here. You reduce your chances to be accused of plagiarism if you just work with direct quotes directly. All right, so if you want to remove unnecessary stuff from inside of a quote, you use those 3 dots there, 3 periods. It's called an ellipsis mark. All right, so let's see, there's an example here. So quote, end quote, and then right there. All right. If you want to add words in, that's what you do if you want to take words out. If you want to add words inside a quote, you use brackets. Okay, this is all in your textbook, so I'm assuming you read it and you're aware of it. So those are sort of the 2 incendiary things that can come up, or forgive me, incidental things that can come up inside of a quote. Now here is where the magic happens, so to speak. All right, is after the quote. All right, you want to provide a correct citation for each quote. Okay, and actual pages and page numbers should indicate the page number. That doesn't happen too much anymore. Now, there is something to be said for PDFs, especially PDFs retrieved from Academic Search Complete. You can, definitely locate the page numbers that a quote appears on and provide them. It's not necessary in the post-quote citation if you've done the introduction of the source correctly. I certainly hope you do. So you always introduce your author. Okay, there's no page numbers if it's an electronic source, which is by far the most common occurrence. So just end the quote and move on. All right, so boy, that quote's old now, isn't it? New York Times music critic Khalifa Sinha, what a great writer. He reports that he writes for the New Yorker now. He doesn't work for the New York Times. That quote, rappers haven't grown increasingly canny using mixtapes to promote themselves. All right, not too much to it. Just make sure you're correct. Okay, quote integration involves these important steps: the intro of in a verb attribution, the accurately quoted quote, and the correct citation. So again, watch the rest of go through the rest of this Prezi, and let me know if you have any questions.